All right. Peace and greetings, YouTubers. So welcome to another edition of In the News. Now, before I go any further, just as a heads up, if you hear a whole bunch of hooting and hollering in the background, there's not much I can do about it. For some reason, my neighbors have been going through it all weekend. They've been fighting since Friday. I don't know what the issue is, but all weekend it's been doors slamming and folks marching and stumping off and then going back in and slamming another door, and then one person's on the phone in the hallway arguing about whatever happened earlier to somebody else, and then we're gonna call this person up here. And they just been going at it all weekend, and I'm just like, all right, it's Monday now. Y'all started this on Friday. Like this was like a Friday Saturday argument. This shouldn't run into Monday. So they just been going at it. And my beef is this: I don't mind people having their disagreements. People are human. It's gonna happen. But it's like, for some reason in this building, whenever anybody gets into any kind of argument, they want to bring it in the hallway so we all gotta hear. Like, why? Like, just stay on over where y'all are at. So they just been going through it all weekend. And if you remember, back when the pandemic started, for those who've been following me for a while, I told you guys that there used to be a couple that lived down the hall, and they used to do the same thing too. They would come out the hall and, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? And I tried to give them some mercy because they had a newborn. I think they were just a little stressed out because, I think, when you first get a new baby, it's a whole adjustment to a lifestyle. And then on top of that, the pandemic had just started. It was a lot. So it is what it is. But they moved. They don't live there no more. So now it's two sisters that live in their apartment, and it's the two sisters that are doing all the fighting. I'm like, I don't know what the issue is, but okay, all right. But you know what? I got them tomorrow morning when I go to work because I got to get up super early tomorrow. And when I tell you, I am about to play all the up-tempos while I get ready. And I'm going to play it on the good sound system. I mean, it's going to be thumping in here. All the New Jack Swing clap. Anything loud, I'm going to mix it with the genres like No Doubt and anything that makes noise, because I just need them to see what I had to deal with all weekend. So yeah, we about to crank tomorrow morning. It's going to be a good time, and I dare them to knock on the door and tell me to turn it down because I'm going to turn it up even louder. Anyway, let's jump into some stories. So for those of you who like to get a cocktail or a glass of wine or something to help you remain calm and tranquil while you fly on a 400,000-pound plane 37,000 feet in the air, you may want to check and see which airlines are still even offering that service, because as of late, several airlines have now suspended alcohol service on flights that are less than 2 hours. That means that turn-up flight from Atlanta to Miami, done. That turn-up flight from DC to New York, done. LA to Vegas, done. And that's due in response to the fact that folks have decided to start cutting up at both the airport and on the planes. So sorry to those who do get anxiety and they need that drink to relax them. I suggest you just play the Sounds of the Rainforest compilation and some headphones, or maybe a gospel playlist or some easy listening or something. Or you can always go with Sade. She can always calm down everybody. But man, it's crazy. It's all due in response to folks cutting up. Pretty much, folks fighting on the planes or assaulting the staff and the flight crew and everything. Just absolutely crazy. And I know you all saw that clip of the flight attendant who got her teeth knocked out by the passenger who punched her in the face. Like, she literally lost 2 teeth while at work. She went to work with teeth and came back with some missing. All I know is this: if I was that flight attendant, one, I'm going to feel some kind of way because now I got to put some big old veneers in to replace them, so I'm going to be pissed off. But secondly, I just know this: at the front of the plane, there's always a pot of hot coffee on ready. At the back of the plane, there's always a pot of hot coffee on ready. And if it's a big enough plane and they got that middle section with the little mini kitchen, there's always 2 pots of coffee on ready, nice and hot. The way I would have... hell no. The way I would have came with that coffee pot and whoosh! Sorry to those who might also get splashed as collateral, but I gotta prove a point. The way all over that person's face, whole face burnt, and I would've went and got the other 2 pots too. Whoosh, then I would've went right back into work mode. Oh, is that a burn? Let's get you a paper towel. Can I get you anything else? Because there is no way, absolutely no way. And the woman's face just bleeding and everything, absolutely crazy. And don't let me be the pilot and find out that you over here assaulting my crew while I'm flying. The way I had the whole plane drop a few hundred feet, all right. I thought I told y'all to sit down. Like, play around. See, it's going to get to the point they're going to start giving these flight attendants taser guns, and we're going to see all kind of other problems, all right? Because you're going to get one of them flight attendants that already got a whole, power grab and just over the top anyway. They're going to be like, I said fasten your seatbelts. Okay. Shoot, all right. Goodness, too much. I need folks to do better. Do better, folks, all right? Y'all ruining it for everybody else. Anyway, moving on. Oh, and then the Bonnet Chronicles. Now, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to stay out of women's business on this one because I don't even want the smoke. But I did see that Monique has been catching a little bit of backlash after she came out with a statement pretty much just saying some of the things she noticed and how she had some concerns about when she goes to the airport and she sees so many young black women wearing scarves and bonnets and house shoes, and she really just wants more people to take a little bit more effort into how they present themselves when they leave the house. Like I said, I ain't jumping in that conversation. I'm going to stay out of women's business, but I do think in all honesty, that at least when it comes to flying and when you're at an airport, people like to be comfortable. You know, I think sometimes flying is already not that great of an experience and you're already uncomfortable, and so you might as well at least put on something that's going to have you feel a little bit better about being in those tiny seats. Because I know for sure I hate sitting in that middle seat. I have very long limbs, long arms, long hands, long feet. I'm a size 12, sometimes 12 and a half shoe. I can't comfortably sit in that little middle seat, so I'm not going to lie. I bring house shoes on the plane sometimes because I don't want to have sneakers. And so I guess it just kind of depends on everybody's experience. I think this is an argument that is also generational. It depends on how people were brought up, and I don't think collectively everybody's going to agree on this one. Everybody's going to either be on one side or the other. I'm sure y'all will be fighting in the comment section in about 2 or 3 more days. It'll be all kind of arguments and dissertations, but you know, it is what it is. I just think sometimes you just got to let people do them. You know, if you're not hurting anybody, live your life and keep it moving. Because I just think back, like even when I was in high school, you know, I was in a small town, Spanaway, Washington, and a lot of times at school, we didn't really take dressing up or anything like super serious. There'll be a lot of days where we'd come with like sweatpants and house shoes and a hoodie to class, you know, especially for those of us that were able to drive or it wasn't raining outside. You put on some house shoes and keep it moving. Shoot, I think that time I told y'all the police had yanked and pulled me over that time, I had some house shoes on and some basketball shorts. So it kind of just depends on, you know, what it is you're doing or where you're going. Now, when I got to Howard, that changed a bit because I didn't realize I was attending a fashion capital. I mean, everybody was doing it up. I was like, okay, I guess I got to actually, you know, jazz it up a little bit because, okay, here we go. But, you know, to each his own. People are going to do what they do, and it is what it is. So why lose sleep over it? You know what I mean? Oh, and then Naomi Osaka. All right, she said she was going to shake the table. She said, how about I just not participate? What you think about that? Okay, boom. All right, she was giving that stony energy from Set It Off. Well, fine then. Y'all take Thelma over there and y'all go rob another bank if you all that. So, anyway, long story short, the French Open is coming up, and she had been pretty much catching some flack because Naomi Osaka really wasn't interested in participating in the media interviews. And so the officials at the French Open are feeling some kind of way, and they're making all these different statements and these new stipulations and telling her that there's going to be different outcomes and reactions, including a $15,000 fine. And so that happens, and then it also gets to the point where they're like, we will also possibly suspend you from this season's French Open if you continue to not do the media interviews. So she was like, well, you know what, how about I just not participate? Boom. So she pulls out, and she went ahead and she released a statement where she talks about, you know, long story short, she's not comfortable speaking in front of audiences, especially after the matches. She's also been dealing with depression, and she's pretty much just on this journey to better herself at the moment, and she didn't want to be a distraction to the French Open, so she felt that it would be best for her to just pull out and return when she's in a better state of mind and in a better position to actually play and be her best. Well, one, I say good for her, because again, I think at the end of the day, she has to be at her best in order to perform her best. So yes, take care of your mental health, go and do you. I think sometimes society can be a little harsher on public figures and entertainers and celebrities and athletes because there's always the assumption that because they're rich, they may not have any internal problems and they can just buy the problems away. But no, like really, when you're dealing with depression like she stated, or different things that really bother and tear you up internally, money can kind of help to get treatment, but money does not actually fix that problem. That's kind of a journey people have to go on, and so on and so forth. So I say good for her. But, you know, the other thing I don't think we think about too is, if we really think about it, athletes are some of the most loved and hated people in society. They're loved for what they do, but a lot of times people absolutely hate them if they're deemed as competition for their favorite team or another athlete, so on and so forth. So even think about her main introduction to most of the world. She'd been playing for a few years, but her claim to fame was 2018. And so when she beat Serena at the time, and, you know, people really wanted Serena to get that 24th slam, you know, Naomi got booed. You know, she got booed on what should have been the greatest night of her life. And now that's the introduction to the rest of her career as far as that set the bar. So, you know, I say good for her. Take your time, do what you need to do. But what's interesting, and the conversation I do want to have, is it's interesting to see the different reactions. Of course, there's going to be the people who fully understand, fully support, and it is what it is. But then you have that huge demographic of people who, like I already say, they think they own black athletes anyway. So they're heavily critical, and they have every issue in the world with what just happened. And we've said that on this channel many, many times before. A lot of people think that they own black athletes. the reactions that you see, this only happens to black athletes most of the time. Like if this would have been Maria, what's her name, Sharapova, the one that did the steroids and still lost to Serena Williams. If that would have been her doing something like that a few years back, she would have been railed as a hero, and she's a woman fighting for her rights, and good for her. She knows how to stand up to him. But instead, you see Naomi do exactly what we just talked about, and she's pretty much getting ripped apart by all kinds of like media and so on and so forth. You see somebody like Piers Morgan come out of whatever underpass he's been hiding under to come and say something, so on and so forth. And so it's just interesting because we've always said that, where again, people think they own black athletes. You saw the response that happened with NFL players when they decided to take a knee. A lot of that had nothing to do with wanting to support the troops or respecting the flag. It was the fact that there were some black people who didn't care about something that white folks cared about, and all of a sudden we need to shut the whole thing down. So not only can you not just stay in the locker room when the national anthem comes on, you need to come out here toes to the line, according to Jerry Jones. You know what I mean? Or you saw how they treat Marshawn Lynch, where again, he was another one who didn't like to do media interviews, and so they started fining him. So he said, okay, I got y'all. I'm going to show up, but I ain't going to say nothing. I'm grateful. I'm here so I don't get fined. I'm here so I don't get fined. You see how they're starting to do LeBron. Ever since LeBron James started to be a little bit more community-oriented and really speaking out about police brutality and different things like the wealth gap, you see a lot of people giving him a bunch of flack and trying to fight him on everything tooth and nail. They did the same thing with Richard Sherman. They're doing the same thing with a lot of these NBA players. Serena Williams, of course, is like the poster child for being torn apart, where people think they can own how you respond and how you react and how you're allowed to feel. And so it happens all the time. And I think it's rooted in the fact that, one, there's an inferiority complex that exists where it bothers a lot of people that so many black athletes are so successful at various sports. And not only that, but in reality, when it comes to athleticism, black people literally dominate any and every sport. And any sport that we're not dominating, it's really just a conversation of access and resources. Because let's be honest, if you start putting some ice hockey rinks in the neighborhood, 15 years from now, half the NHL is going to be black. And if we really want to go deeper, of course, there were black hockey leagues. Like, black people have been playing hockey since 1895. There was a whole colored hockey league, and that's another conversation. But like I was saying, like, it's no secret. Anything we pretty much jump into athletically, we dominate. And then not only that, we bring ratings and bring popularity. Nobody was paying attention to the PGA until Tiger Woods showed up. He may not claim us, but at the end of the day, people still saw a black man playing. And so, same thing with tennis. After Althea Gibson pretty much was done with tennis, people weren't really paying attention until the Williams sisters came in there. And not only did the Williams sisters come in there and really bring up the ratings, but I mean, when you're just talking about the revenue that comes in. And so again, people think that they own athletes. And so there's this energy that comes out where it's kind of like, you should just be grateful you're here because it's a miracle you even made it this far. So do everything we tell you to do or we can end you. And that's pretty much the relationship that a lot of black athletes have with the media, because the media has always been very wishy-washy. And so I think for somebody like Naomi Osaka, again, there's a nervousness that exists with going and doing certain interviews because you recognize that all it takes is one slip up or something to be taken out of context, and now it's a soundbite, and it's going to be something that they use later on to pull you down once the media no longer likes you. All right, we've seen them do that with so many different entertainers and athletes. And the other thing is, sometimes I don't think we think about the fact that a lot of these athletes, because the world of athleticism is a very young field, it's a very young occupation, a lot of these people come in as kids. And so they come into this field as kids, and they have to make their mistakes in front of the entire world. For the world to ridicule and tear apart and so on and so forth. You're not getting the same kind of PR or artist development that a singer would get. And so, again, you're pretty much out there in the open for everything. And so you see how black athletes are penalized, judged, and they literally sometimes will make and change the rules just because they don't like who is who. Like, again, going back to Serena, remember the time she pretty much had to pull out of the match because she wasn't allowed to wear the compression bodysuit she had because, again, she had blood clots. And so that was one of the ways to kind of help make sure the blood still flowed. And they're like, oh, you can't wear that. Absolutely not. And so a lot of times you just see that there's kind of just this weird energy that exists with a lot of black athletes where they're so heavily just criticized all the time. You know what I mean? And so I understand why she may want to take a break. That's a lot. Like I've said, like, if she's saying she's been depressed since 2018 and it still hasn't gotten better, and again, you have all this pressure riding on your shoulders and the weight of the world right there, and people want you to perform and be your best. If you're not at your best, sometimes you got to pull out and do what it is you need to do to get into a better state of mind. And so, again, it's interesting that instead of understanding that, people were like, well, we'll just fine you. You'll have to pay this because you didn't talk to our cameras. And like I said, again, the media is wishy-washy. They love to tear these people down anyway. Nobody wants to speak to them. And so it's a lot. Even kind of like thinking back with what happened with these NBA players and them throwing the water bottles or throwing the popcorn. Again, people thinking they own athletes. They forget that these people are also human. And so now you have people literally trying to assault, athletes that are 6'7", 6'8". Like, you really want smoke with some of these NBA players, really? Did y'all not learn from Ron Artest? Meta World Peace? Y'all didn't learn from that Pistons and Pacers game? Keep playing with these athletes if you want to. But I tell you what's going to end up happening, which I hate to see. They're going to start kind of really turning on Naomi. That's the next step. They're going to start turning on this girl, and they're going to kind of paint her out to be like this spoiled brat and paint her to be entitled. And now you're going to start seeing more articles that are more critical of everything that she does. Kind of the same way they did the Meghan Markle girl, or kind of like how they did Michelle Obama, or how they do pretty much a lot of black women in media and in entertainment. It's just a thing that they do. It is what it is, sadly. It sucks, but Naomi, we're rooting for you, so you'll be fine. We support you. At least I do. For those of you who don't, that's on you. Fix your energy. I don't know what you're mad about. Anyway, moving on. And then this year marks the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa Massacre. Now, on this channel, we've talked about Tulsa many times. It's almost kind of a default reference at this point. However, I still want to talk about a few things. One, I was going to say there was a really good documentary that aired on the History Channel on Sunday. I think you can still watch it on their website, or I'm sure it will re-air. But that was actually a pretty good documentary for those who may not really be familiar with Tulsa. Because like I said on the video from last week, Tulsa only became a part of the national conversation about 20 years ago once the victims of that massacre started to speak out, because it was something that got pretty much suppressed. Like, they pretty much tried to bury that story. Even the way the media reported the story when it happened is really fickle. Like, look at how the articles presented everything. There's no mention of, they went and they burned down 1,200 homes in 35 city blocks and had over $2.5 million in damage, which would equate to about $37 million in today's times. Like, none of that was really in there. It was kind of pushed off as, there was a little riot where some people got in a fight and there were a handful of white people that were killed, but it's all handled now, so we're all good. And so there's just a bunch of things that kind of stick out to me. Or even the fact that after Tulsa burned down, like, there's so many horrible things that happened. One, it was terrible with the fact that after they pretty much burned everything down, the few people that were, that were left that were still trying to flee, that they captured and then arrested. And mind you, what also is triggering is knowing that the police deputized pretty much any white citizen in the town and gave them free reign to do whatever they wanted and gave them all kind of guns and weapons. But, the people who literally just had their homes burned down or their family members killed or their businesses destroyed were now arrested, now detained, and pretty much left with nothing and had to pretty much start over, which is crazy. And on top of that, even when you talk about legislation and policy, some of the rules that came into play, they tried to make certain fire ordinances in that specific part of Greenwood where it would be like, oh no, you can't rebuild in this area. So not only did they burn down the black section of town, they tried to set it up where they couldn't even go back and rebuild what they had. That's what kind of really makes it just so absolutely terrible. And then, of course, now you have the freeway system. We've had those conversations about multiple cities, but the freeway system has kind of been built over some of that. And man, so many layers. But the other part is, we always talk about Tulsa, but Tulsa is just one example. And I think it highlights the fact that anytime black people collectively had built themselves up, especially during that time, it was always torn back down. And I think, again, that element of that inferiority complex, seeing what it is that black people can do without anybody bothering them. You know what I mean? And so I did want to also reference this book. I think I talked about it before, but 1919, the year of racial violence. Now, I do think the title is stupid. They need to rechange it to like the year of white aggression or white anger at the expense of black people and black safety. But this is a really great read because it talks about a lot of what you saw in the United States as far as white mobs going and destroying black cities or black neighborhoods. And pretty much this book specifically highlights what happened in D.C. back in 1919, also Louisiana, Arkansas, Chicago, a few other places, but just talking about how, again, that animosity towards black prosperity, where people feel threatened by black success. So rather than finding ways to collaborate or maybe even learn from it, it's like, let's just burn it all down and destroy it. Let's find every small reason we can think of to start some kind of chaos and some kind of drama. Even they don't talk about it that much, but even Slocum, Texas is another example. I'm going to do a different video and highlight that one because there's a lot of very interesting details on that one as well. But that's another one that you don't hear about as much. And so it's not like Tulsa was the only one. That's what makes it scary. Tulsa's just one of the ones that we finally started to hear about because the remaining survivors started talking about it in the late 90s. But man, imagine if some of the survivors of some of these other ones start to speak out, those who are still here, or if their offspring or their great-grandchildren start speaking about some of the atrocities that happened. Because what also makes all of this kind of scary is the fact that the media got to control the narrative. And so, again, folks were able to brush things under the rug. And that's why I was so heavily critical about the backlash that critical race theory is getting, because again, this is how you can have something like a Tulsa happen and nobody really understand or talk about it or really know about it until years later. Mainly because, again, you kept it out of the history books. You brushed it over and tried to make it seem like nothing happened, or, again, the fear of being honest about the truth in the United States when it comes to how citizens are treated, specifically black people, and how black people have to maneuver through the realms of anti-blackness. You know, you sit there and you pretty much take everything out of the narrative and you throw things away and bury things and try to act like things never happened and just change the narrative. That's how we get here. Like, I was thinking about Tulsa the other day. Somebody on Twitter was saying how they never heard of Tulsa until they were in college. I was like, you know what? That was me too. I never heard of Tulsa until my junior year of college. And honestly, it was because my professor at the time was also a historian and specifically had a focus on Tulsa. So she really was giving it to us. I wish I could remember her last name. It's like LaFleur or something like that. I can't remember. But man, when she gave us that introduction into everything that happened, I was like, why don't we know about this? Like, wow. You know, so I'm grateful that these up and coming generations, a lot of this information is now out there. But there's also a conversation to be had about what's owed. That's really the conversation, because again, like we said, you burn down this entire section of town and leave the people with literally nothing. Like nothing. And then after you burn down everybody, you make them live on the state fairgrounds while they're arrested and so on and so forth. And all of that wealth that was created, there was nothing. There was no check. There was no reciprocity, nothing. There was nothing to make whole. And people had to literally start over with nothing again for like the third time. You know, the first time would have been after slavery was over and you finally have your freedom, but you don't have anything. So where do we go from here? And then you saw how construction was pretty much seam ripped, and that was a fail. And then you saw what happened with that once they started coming out with all the pretty much Jim Crow type laws and so on and so forth. And so it's like every single time you watch black people build themselves up, you watch it get torn right back down. And that's why you have conversations about the generational wealth gap and why it's still growing even in 2021. So there's a lot of things to be said. I hope that's a lesson for a lot of people to really kind of just dig into things and look at how history operates, because everything's operating in a cycle right now. What happened in Tulsa, you're still seeing happen. It may not be in the realms of burning things down, but now they're doing it with the policy. They're doing it with the laws. They're doing it with the voter disenfranchisement and the voter suppression and so on and so forth. They're going to find ways to make sure that people stay in whatever little pocket they want people to stay in, which is kind of sad and disturbing, but it should also enrage you and also make you want to do something about it. Anyway, moving on. Okay, so for this next piece, I don't want to get too excited, but I do think this is a step in the right direction. And it states, Illinois became the first state Sunday to pass a bill that will ban police from lying to youth during interrogations, a practice that adds significantly to the risk of false confessions and wrongful convictions. It is expected to be signed into law by the governor in the coming weeks. A bill still pending in New York would apply to adults as well as minors. Their deceptive interrogation techniques have contributed to several infamous juvenile wrongful convictions, including 15-year-old Yusef Salaam of the so-called Central Park Five, now known as the Exonerated Five. The 5 black and Latino teens were coerced into confessing to a rape they didn't commit in 1989 and served prison time before being exonerated in 2002. Illinois has in recent years uncovered at least 100 wrongful convictions predicated on false confessions, 31 of them involving people under 18 years of age. And so like I was saying earlier, I do think it's a step in the right direction. However, I do get nervous along the conversation and along the lines of implementation, because there are several states and cities and towns that have different laws that they've signed into practice. However, you're not seeing them really be practiced, or you're not really seeing the accountability come into fruition, and you're still seeing the same pattern repeat itself. And I do understand that when you're trying to take down a system, patchwork policy is not going to fix that system. And so, you know, I'm going to kind of keep my eye and see how things operate in relation to that. But I do think that is a step in the right direction. And it just sucks that you have to come up with laws to get police and investigators to do the right thing. The fact that people are willing to coerce youth into confessing or taking plea deals or signing on and admitting to doing things that they know they didn't do, that will always just baffle me in relation to the Central Park Five. Like, you literally had kids admitting to doing something when they weren't even at the location. They were at home. The police came to pick up the friend, and the other friend just went with them to be supportive. Next thing you know, they end up getting the longest jail sentence. Crazy, right? Goodness. Anyway, I need to go to bed. However, I have been paying attention to what's happening in Texas with that bill that they're trying to pass that would pretty much change how voting is handled in the state. And like, that bill is crazy. And again, it's not just Texas, because pretty much every state has something on the docket at the moment. Like, here's an example. See, like, literally all these states got something going on. And like I said, pay attention to the local elections, because a lot of times when you start getting to those smaller positions and to the boards and different advisory boards and everything else that exists, they're calling a lot of the shots around there, which pretty much monopolizes the entire state when it comes to who really holds power. But like I was saying with this Texas bill, there's so many bits in there. There's a part in there where it was saying how it's illegal to transport more than 2 people to the polls if they're not a family member, so you can't do that. Even the bit where it talks about how a judge can literally overthrow the election, even if there are no claims of actual fraud or any evidence to support claims of fraud, they can just overthrow it. Now that's something to pay attention to, because I'm sure you're going to see similar writing in other bills that go to other states as well. And pretty much you have something like that go down, then you have certain groups of people who can hold on and maintain the power long term, even if they don't have a majority when it comes to support by the masses and the people. Again, these states are showing you that clearly there's a status quo they want to maintain, because why make it so hard to vote? You could just be like a state like Oregon and just have everybody registered to vote right off the jump and here you go. But, you know, it's crazy. If you really want to know what it is that the people want, let the people freaking vote. It's not like y'all have great candidates for us to choose from anyway. Anyway, I'm out. Share your 2 cents. Subscribe.
You got to cut the way you drag from place to place. You got to cut.